let's see. Okay. Let's see. I'm gonna go over basically the basics of the mesh modifier. So first things first, it only runs in play mode, just because I haven't gotten it to work in the editor yet. So if it's not, working, maybe that's why. Okay, so here's all your components, all your modifiers. I'm not gonna go over all of them, but I will. Let's add trig because that's fun. So trig is basically just move it on a sine, cosine, or I don't know why you'd ever use tangent, but tangent wave. Okay, so as you can see, it added when I added this trig modifier, it added the modifier object. That's like the central manager that because you can have multiple modifiers that kind of takes care of all of them. So if I and it comes with a couple other handy stuff. Let's turn up the frequency. Okay, cool. So I mean, it makes sense. So modifier object, you can turn down the modifier strength. So that's cool. You can tell it not to update every frame. You can tell it not to update the normals, etc. Modifier strength vertex mask. That's basically a little more advanced. Not really. Whatever. You can paint colors onto. You can paint the vertex colors of a mesh, and you can say, hey, don't modify vertices where the color is red, or based on how red each vertex is. So yeah, that's cool. If you want to modify, I don't know, whatever. You can think of something. So the next biggest thing here, let me give this some speed, is modify frames. This is like the biggest optimization thing you can do to make it run better, because basically this runs on the CPU because I don't know how to get it to run on the GPU, and it's super fast to develop on the CPU. It's really, really easy to extend, blah, 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 blah. So modify frames is basically saying, this is how many frames it's going to take for the modifiers to do their thing to the mesh. So right now it's 1, so it's just performing normally. If I turn it up to 2, you can see it's getting a little bit more, it doesn't look quite as smooth. So basically what it's doing is saying, instead of modifying the entire mesh over 1 frame, modify it over 2 frames. So it kind of splits it into 2 chunks, modifies the first chunk, second chunk, and then updates the mesh. So I tried, as soon as it updates a chunk, reflecting that in the mesh, but it looks really bad because then chunks of meshes are, a frame ahead of the other chunks. It doesn't look good. Anyways, so if I turn on the profiler, the trig modifier is going to run pretty good, but I can add. This is the modifier I add when I want to test off optimization, because it runs terribly and I should just remove it. The however you say it, Voronoi modifier runs terribly. So basically, now it dropped like 50 FPS at least. But what I can do, okay, so here we go. If I turn it down to doing it every frame, normally, then we're getting like sub 30 FPS. If I turn it up, we've already, more than doubled the frame rate. At the cost of it, not looking as smooth. But you can pretty much, unless somebody has a keen eye, you can almost always get away with 2 modified frames. 3, it gets a little more sketchy, obviously, but there's a script a little utility script that basically changes the modify frames based off of the camera's distance. So from here, it looks fine. So you could add that to a modifier that's maybe particularly expensive, or just any of them. You should probably do it to all of them. And then obviously you can crank it like way beyond a reasonable amount. That looks awful, but as you can see, the scene is running smoothly. Like there's no cost. Like this is about how fast the scene was running, without the modifiers. And so, I mean, you'd have to be pretty far away for this to be acceptable, but whatever. Okay, so that's pretty much it. You can toy around with the modifiers. They stack. You can change the order of them. There won't be a huge difference here, but yeah, whatever. You can mess around with all the other modifiers. There's a good bit of them. Blah blah blah. Fun stuff. I'm gonna make a tutorial later on how to make your own modifiers, because it's really easy and it's actually pretty fun.